The phone kept lighting up in my hand, then going dark, then lighting up again. I wasn't answering it. I was just watching it buzz against my palm like it was trying to crawl away from me. A bus roared past and shook the metal bench beneath me. The trash bag at my feet rustled, thin plastic scraping against concrete. Everything I owned was inside it. Clothes folded badly. Shoes I didn't have room to care about. A notebook with blank pages I'd never filled because I'd always assumed there would be time later. My mom's name flashed again. I hadn't cried yet. That was the strange part. My chest felt tight, but my eyes stayed dry, like my body hadn't caught up to what had already happened. The air was still warm even though the sun had been down for hours, that dry phoenix heat clinging to my skin like it didn't know when to leave. A car slowed near the intersection. Headlights washed over me. I sat straighter without meaning to, gripping my backpack tighter, already preparing to move if I had to. The car turned. My shoulders dropped back down. The phone buzzed again. I thought about answering. Just for a second. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to hear if her voice sounded different now. If there was any crack in it. Any sign that what she'd done was sinking in. Instead, the screen went dark. My battery warning flashed red. I turned the phone face down and pressed it against my thigh, like that might quiet it. It didn't. Earlier that night, the sound that stayed with me wasn't her voice. It was the trash bag hitting the floor. That dull, final thud. Like punctuation. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't even looked angry. She stood in the doorway of the apartment, arms crossed, eyes tired in a way that didn't include me. The hallway light behind her was brighter than the living room, so her face stayed half in shadow. "You're 18 now," she said. "No money. No job. That's on you. Get out." She dropped the bag at my feet like it was something she'd been holding too long and couldn't wait to let go of. I'd waited for the follow-up. The warning. The part where she cooled off and told me to put my things back in my room. She'd threatened this before. Whenever she wanted me to move faster, be quieter, need less. But this time she picked up my backpack from the couch, shoved it into my hands, opened the front door, and pushed me just hard enough that I had to take a step into the hallway. The door locked behind me. No pause. No, we'll talk tomorrow. Just the click of the deadbolt and her footsteps moving away. I stared at the door for a long second, my reflection warped in the cheap brass handle. I imagined knocking. Not pounding. Just knocking once. Saying I'd find work. Saying I'd stay out of her way. Saying whatever she needed to hear. Then I pictured the look she'd give me if I did. That small, satisfied smile she got when she won. When I folded first. My face burned hotter than the hallway air. So I didn't knock. I picked up the trash bag, slung the backpack over my shoulder, and walked down the stairs before the tears could catch up to me and turn the whole building into an audience. Now I was here. A few blocks away. Sitting at a bus stop that smelled like dust and old soda, hugging my backpack like it could keep me anchored. The bench was hard plastic, curved in a way that made sure no one stayed too long. My back already ached, but I didn't shift. Moving made things feel less real, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The phone buzzed again. I turned it over and stared at her name. If I called her, everything could snap back into place. Not better. Just familiar. Me apologizing. Her calling it tough love. Me shrinking my needs until they fit inside whatever space she decided I deserved. I powered the phone off instead. The sudden silence felt louder than the traffic. I whispered it without thinking, my voice barely louder than the wind moving grit across the sidewalk. If you want me to survive alone, fine. I will. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time a car slowed, my heart jumped into my throat. Every laugh from somewhere down the street made me tense, like it might be aimed at me. The city didn't care that my life had just cracked open. It kept breathing around me, steady and indifferent. Every laugh from somewhere down the street made me tense, like it might be aimed at me. The city didn't care that my life had just cracked open. It kept breathing around me, steady and indifferent. By sunrise, my neck was stiff and my mouth tasted like I'd been swallowing tears instead of water. The sky lightened slowly, turning the buildings pale and washed out. I stood up too fast and had to grab the edge of the bench to steady myself. I walked until I found a 24-hour convenience store and washed my face in the tiny bathroom sink. The fluorescent light overhead was unforgiving. I leaned closer to the mirror, searching for something that looked different. I still looked like me. That almost hurt more. I bought a breakfast sandwich wrapped in greasy paper and the smallest coffee they sold. $5. I stared at the receipt longer than I should have, like it had personally insulted me. 1/4 of my money was gone. I sat on the curb outside and ate slowly, even though I was starving, stretching each bite like it mattered. The coffee was too hot, then too bitter, but I drank it anyway. I started walking. Strip mall after strip mall. Glass doors, handwritten signs, blinking open lights. I pushed doors open and asked the same question over and over. Are you hiring? Sometimes they didn't even look up. Sometimes they smiled in that polite way that already meant no. Not right now. Apply online. Come back when we're less busy. My trash bag dragged against the sidewalk, tearing a little more each time it caught on something. By afternoon, the Arizona heat wrapped around me like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake. Sweat stuck my shirt to my back. My legs felt hollow. I'd never felt so invisible in my own city. By late afternoon, I wandered into a church basement with a sign taped to the door, free meals, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I went because my stomach hurt. I stayed because a woman with a clipboard and tired eyes sat across from me and asked my name like it mattered. When she asked where I was sleeping, I pretended to check my phone so I wouldn't have to meet her gaze. The phone stayed dark. I don't really have a place right now, I said. She nodded, like that sentence fit into a category she already understood. That night ended somewhere with rules. Real ones. A bed that wasn't soft but was mine for the night. A door that closed without locking me out. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to other people breathe, my body finally letting go enough to shake. I didn't know yet that the rules would matter. That they would follow me longer than the fear did. All I knew was that my phone stayed off, and for the first time since the door locked behind me, no one was telling me to leave. But even then, as sleep finally crept in, a thought settled heavy in my chest. If my own mother could let go this easily, what was going to happen when she needed something back? I woke up before anyone else, not because I was rested, but because my body didn't trust the quiet. The room was still dim, early light leaking through high windows that didn't open. Rows of metal-framed beds lined the walls, each one neatly made except for mine. I lay there staring up, listening. Someone coughed in their sleep. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked and shut again. No one was yelling. No one was telling me to hurry up or get out of the way. That almost felt worse. I sat up slowly and pulled my shoes on, tying the laces tighter than they needed to be. The floor was cold under my feet. I gathered my trash bag and backpack and stood there for a moment, unsure what the next move was supposed to be. When you've always been reacting, choosing feels strange. A woman I hadn't noticed the night before stood near the doorway with a clipboard tucked against her chest. She was older, gray threaded through her hair, posture straight without being stiff. She didn't smile when she saw me awake, but her expression softened just enough to register that she'd noticed. "You're up early," she said. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I said automatically. The words came out before I could stop them. She tilted her head slightly. "No one said you were." She glanced at the clipboard. "Emma, right?" I nodded. "I'm Rachel. I help coordinate intake here." She didn't offer her hand. She didn't ask me to sit. "We do things a certain way. If you're staying, you follow the rules. If you don't, you don't." I waited for the part where she reassured me. It never came. She continued, breakfast is at 7. You clean up after yourself. Curfew's 10. You're responsible for finding work. This isn't a long-term solution. Something about the way she said it, flat, factual, made it easier to breathe. How long can I stay? I asked. She checked a box on the paper. Depends on you. That was it. No sympathy. No story about second chances. Just expectations, laid out cleanly. I ate breakfast at a folding table with strangers who didn't ask questions. The food was simple. Eggs, toast, coffee that tasted burnt. I didn't complain. I didn't rush. I watched how everyone else moved, how they stacked plates, how they avoided eye contact without being rude. Survival, apparently, had its own etiquette. Afterward, Rachel handed me a printed list of nearby businesses. Start here, she said. Come back with names. Not excuses. I folded the paper and slipped it into my backpack like it was something important. Outside, the heat was already building. I walked slower than I had the day before, not because I had more energy, but because I had direction. It wasn't much. Just addresses and phone numbers. But it was something that belonged to me. By noon, my feet hurt and my voice felt thin from repeating myself. Are you hiring? No. Apply online. We'll call you. They never did. I learned which places wouldn't even let me finish the question. I learned which managers avoided eye contact and which ones looked apologetic without offering anything. I learned to keep my shoulders back, even when rejection stacked up in my chest. Around mid-afternoon, I stopped checking my phone entirely. The battery was nearly gone anyway. I didn't want to watch it die. That night, I followed the rules. Dinner. Cleanup. Curfew. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling again, but this time my body didn't shake. Instead, my mind replayed my mother's voice, not angry, just final. You are 18 now. I wondered if she'd slept well. If she'd noticed the quiet of my room. If she'd stepped over the space where my trash bag had hit the floor and felt anything at all. The next morning was the same, and then the next. Days didn't announce themselves. They just happened. I found a job washing dishes at a diner off the highway. The manager didn't ask many questions. He just pointed to the sink and told me to show up on time. The pay was minimum wage. The hours were early and late and exhausting. I said yes, without hesitating. My hands stayed wrinkled and raw. My back ached. I smelled like grease even after showering. But when I handed Rachel my first pay stub, she nodded once, like I'd passed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. Good, she said. Keep going. Rules multiplied. Save part of each paycheck. Don't skip shifts. Don't come back late. If you break curfew, there are consequences. I didn't ask what they were. There were moments I hated it. Nights when my legs throbbed and my patience wore thin, when the idea of calling my mom crept in uninvited. It would have been easy to frame it as reconciliation. To pretend this had all been a misunderstanding. But I remembered the door locking behind me. I remembered the way she didn't look back. Some lessons don't need repeating. Weeks blurred into each other. I learned which bus routes ran late and which ones didn't. I learned how to stretch a meal, how to fold clothes so they took up less space, how to keep my head down without disappearing. One evening, I came back a few minutes after curfew. Not by much. Traffic. A delayed bus. Nothing dramatic. Rachel met me at the door. You're late, she said. I know, I replied. I didn't explain. She marked something on her clipboard. Tomorrow, you clean the bathrooms. I nodded. As I walked away, resentment flared sharp and sudden. It felt unfair. I was trying. I was doing everything right. Didn't that count? The thought surprised me. It sounded familiar. I cleaned the bathrooms the next day without complaint. The resentment faded into something else. Understanding, maybe. Or just acceptance. Time passed in small, unremarkable ways. Paychecks came. A little savings accumulated. My posture changed. I stopped flinching when doors closed. I stopped expecting the floor to drop out from under me. I found a room to rent from a woman who didn't ask questions and wanted cash on time. I moved my things in one trip. The trash bag tore completely, and I threw it away without ceremony. Standing in that empty room, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Not happiness. Stability. I didn't tell my mother where I was. I didn't tell her anything. The first message came late one night, long after I'd stopped checking for them. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then another. And another. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I wasn't angry. That surprised me too. I just wasn't ready to give her access to the version of me that had learned how to stand without asking permission. And I had a feeling, quiet, persistent, that the apology wasn't about what she'd done. It was about what she was about to lose. That was when I realized the hardest part wasn't surviving alone. It was deciding who got to find me afterward. I didn't answer her messages. Not the first night. Not the second. I read them once, then archived the thread so I wouldn't see her name every time I unlocked my phone. It wasn't an act of strength. It was practicality. I was still learning how to keep my balance, and I knew better than to lean on something that had already proven it would move. Life settled into a rhythm that didn't care how I felt about it. Work. Sleep. Save. Repeat. The diner smelled the same every morning, old coffee, bleach, grease that never quite left the walls. I learned how to move fast without rushing, how to listen for the bell that meant another stack of plates was coming. My hands stayed rough no matter how much lotion I used. I stopped noticing. On my days off, I walked. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because staying still made my thoughts louder. I learned which streets had shade in the afternoon, which ones cut through neighborhoods that didn't look at me twice. I learned how to exist without taking up too much space. That was new. The room I rented stayed quiet. Too quiet sometimes. A twin mattress, a dresser with a drawer that stuck, a window that faced another building. No one checked on me. No one asked where I was going. It felt like freedom and abandonment at the same time, and I didn't yet know how to separate the two. I kept following rules even when no one was watching. I went to bed early. I showed up on time. I didn't call out sick unless I was actually sick. Part of me still expected someone like Rachel to be standing there with a clipboard, marking down every mistake. She never was. But the habit stuck. One afternoon, after a double shift, I stopped at a thrift store on the way home. I hadn't planned to. I just didn't want to go back to my room yet. I bought a second-hand blazer that almost fit and a pair of shoes that didn't pinch. Standing in the cracked mirror of the fitting room, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked better. Because I looked steady. That night, my mom called. Not a message this time. An actual call. The phone vibrated against the table while I was eating instant noodles, steam fogging up my glasses. I watched it ring until it stopped. My appetite disappeared. The next morning, there was a voicemail. Her voice sounded careful. Like she was choosing each word before letting it go. She didn't mention the night she kicked me out. She didn't apologize again. She just said she hoped I was okay, and that she missed me. Missed what, I wondered. The version of me that fit neatly into her life? The one who didn't push back? I deleted the voicemail. Weeks passed. Then months. Time didn't feel like something I moved through anymore. It felt like something that moved around me, quietly rearranging things when I wasn't looking. I picked up extra shifts. I started helping train new hires at the diner, showing them how to stack plates so they wouldn't slide, how to keep their hands out of the way when the line got busy. The manager nodded at me more often. He trusted me with closing. I didn't tell anyone about my mother. Not because it was a secret. Because it wasn't relevant. On my birthday, I worked a double. Someone left a slice of cake in the break room with my name written in messy frosting. I ate it standing up, fork scraping the bottom of the plastic container, and felt unexpectedly full. That night, another message came through. I need help. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. I stared at the words longer than I wanted to admit. Help meant many things. Money. A place to stay. Emotional absolution. I didn't know which one she was asking for, and I didn't want to guess wrong. I typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. In the end, I didn't send anything. Not because I wanted her to struggle. Because I knew how easily one conversation could undo months of careful progress. There's a point where survival turns into something quieter. Less urgent. More deliberate. I had crossed that line without realizing it. The diner wasn't my end goal. I knew that. It was a step. I started taking night classes at a community college nearby, paying one course at a time. Business basics. Accounting. Things that felt solid. Useful. I studied at the small desk in my room, the hum of traffic outside my window filling the silence. When I got tired, I stood up and stretched. When something didn't make sense, I looked it up instead of giving up. No one clapped for that. No one noticed. That was okay. The first time I saw my mother again, it wasn't planned. I was leaving the grocery store, bags cutting into my fingers, when I heard my name. Not shouted. Just surprised. I turned. She stood a few feet away, frozen mid-step. She looked thinner. Older. Her hair pulled back like she hadn't had time to think about it. For a moment, neither of us moved. Emma, she said again, softer. I nodded. Hi. She looked at the bags in my hands, then at my clothes, like she was trying to take inventory of my life in under 5 seconds. I've been calling, she said. I know. There was a pause. Cars passed behind her. A shopping cart rattled nearby. You didn't answer. I didn't want to. The words came out calm. That surprised both of us. Her mouth opened, then closed. She nodded slowly, like she was absorbing a rule she hadn't known existed. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said. Something in my chest shifted. Not anger. Clarity. I didn't either, I replied. She asked where I was staying. I didn't tell her. She asked if I was working. I said yes. She asked if we could talk sometime. Maybe, I said. Not today. She didn't push. That was new. I walked away before the moment could stretch into something heavier. My hands were shaking by the time I loaded the groceries into my car, but it passed. That night, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. The messages slowed after that. Became less frequent. More careful. I responded once, briefly, setting boundaries I hadn't known how to articulate before. I can't help right now. I hope you understand. She didn't reply. Life kept moving. Classes finished. New ones started. I left the diner for a better job, still entry-level, still unglamorous, but closer to what I was building toward. I rented a slightly bigger place. I bought furniture one piece at a time. There was a calm that settled in, so subtle I almost missed it. Days where nothing dramatic happened. Nights where sleep came easily. Mornings where I didn't brace myself before getting out of bed. It felt like the story might end there. But stories rarely announce when they're about to turn. One afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was at work. It was my mother. This time, the message was longer. She said she was in trouble. That things had fallen apart faster than she'd expected. That she didn't know who else to ask. I read it once. Then again. The old instinct tugged at me, familiar and heavy. The urge to fix things. To smooth the edges. To step back into a role I'd never agreed to but had played for years. I set the phone down and finished what I was doing before picking it up again. Because I understood something now that I hadn't back at the bus stop. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about whether I would undo myself to make her comfortable. And that was a question I wasn't going to answer quickly. Not anymore. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was trying to make a point, but because I'd learned the difference between urgency and importance. Her message felt urgent. My life finally felt important. I finished my shift, shut down my computer, and drove home with the radio off. The city slid by in familiar pieces, intersections I knew, lights timed just right, streets I could navigate without thinking. That alone told me how far I'd come. There was a time when Phoenix felt like it was rejecting me at every corner. At home, I sat at the small kitchen table and reread her message. She said things were complicated. That bills had piled up. That she'd made some mistakes. That she didn't expect anything, she just didn't know who else to reach out to. There was no mention of the night she locked the door. There never was. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. I typed slowly. I'm sorry you're going through that. I can't help financially. I hope you figure things out. I read it 3 times before sending it. My hand didn't shake. Her reply came the next day. Shorter. Cooler. I understand. But the calls didn't stop. Sometimes she left voicemails that sounded steady, almost rehearsed. Other times her voice cracked halfway through a sentence, like she'd forgotten how to keep it together. Each message carried the same weight, the same expectation wrapped in different words. I listened once. Then I stopped. There was a quiet rule I'd made for myself somewhere along the way: I wouldn't let guilt make my decisions anymore. Guilt had already cost me too much. Life kept unfolding in ordinary ways. I passed a class I'd been nervous about. I got a small raise. I learned how to say no at work without apologizing first. I learned how to say yes, without over-explaining. Those things added up. One evening, months later, I ran into Rachel again. It was outside the same church basement. I was there dropping off a bag of clothes I no longer needed. She was locking up, her clipboard still tucked under her arm like it belonged there. She recognized me immediately. You look different, she said. Older, I replied. She gave a brief smile. That too. We stood there for a moment, the sun dropping low enough to soften the edges of everything. I thanked her. Not dramatically. Just plainly. She nodded. You did the work. We just gave you a place to start. As I walked back to my car, I thought about that first night. About how angry I'd been at the rules. How small they'd made me feel at the time. I understood them now. Rules weren't there to control me. They were there to see if I could control myself. The next time my mother showed up, it wasn't by accident. She came to my apartment. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a tote bag at her feet, eyes scanning the hallway like she was already calculating how long she could stay. Her smile was tentative, hopeful in a way that felt practiced. I just wanted to talk, she said. I didn't invite her in. We stood there, door half open, the air between us tight but quiet. She talked about stress. About bad luck. About how hard it was doing everything alone. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. I took a breath. I'm not in a position to help you, I said. And even if I were, I wouldn't do it this way. Her face fell, not dramatically, but in small increments. Like she was realizing something piece by piece. I raised you, she said softly. Yes, I replied. And then you let me go. The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. She looked past me, into the apartment. The clean counters. The second-hand couch. The quiet order of a life that didn't include her. You're doing well, she said. I nodded. I am. She waited. For an invitation. For reassurance. For something to soften the moment. It didn't come. Eventually, she picked up the tote bag. I didn't think you'd turn out like this, she said. Neither had I. She left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the echo of her presence fade. There was no rush of victory. No satisfaction. Just a steady sense of alignment, like something that had been out of place for years had finally clicked where it belonged. That night, I slept deeply. In the weeks that followed, the messages stopped. Completely. I heard through someone else that she'd moved in with a relative. That things were still unstable. That she talked about me like I was a closed chapter she didn't know how to reopen. I didn't correct the story. My life grew in quiet ways. I finished my program. I moved into a better job. I made friends who knew me only as I was now, not as someone who needed saving. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the bus stop. The trash bag. The phone lighting up in my hand. Not with bitterness. With perspective. Because being kicked out with nothing hadn't broken me. It had stripped things down until only the necessary parts were left. And once I learned how to build from there, I understood something my mother never did. Some doors don't close to punish you. They close to force you to walk far enough that you don't need them anymore. And that was the moment I knew this part of my life was finished. Not because she apologized. But because I no longer needed one. The next morning felt ordinary in a way that surprised me. No heavy thoughts. No replaying old scenes. Just sunlight through the blinds and the sound of my phone alarm doing its job. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched people hurry through lives that didn't include me, and for once, that didn't make me feel small. It made me feel grounded. At work, nothing dramatic happened. No big announcement. No sudden applause for how far I'd come. Just emails, meetings, small decisions that trusted me to know what I was doing. That trust had been earned quietly, over time, without anyone clapping for it. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. Not my mother. An unknown number. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail while I finished what I was doing. That alone told me something important had changed. There was a version of me who would have dropped everything, heart racing, afraid of missing something. That version didn't live here anymore. The voicemail was short. Lexi, it's your aunt. Your mom said you might not pick up. She just wanted me to check if you're okay. No accusation. No demand. Just a soft reach through someone else. I didn't call back right away. I thought about what okay actually meant now. Okay wasn't having everything figured out. It wasn't being untouched by the past. It was knowing I could stand where I was without needing anyone's permission. It was being able to say no without rehearsing an explanation. It was not feeling responsible for fixing what I didn't break. That evening, I went for a walk. The air was cooler than it used to be at that hour. Phoenix had a way of changing without warning, like it was reminding you that nothing stays brutal forever. I passed a bus stop, different street, same design, and noticed someone sitting there with a backpack pulled tight against their chest. For a second, my chest tightened. Not panic. Recognition. I kept walking. Because my story didn't live there anymore. Later that night, I finally sent a message to my aunt. I'm okay. I hope she is too. That was it. No updates. No promises. No opening for negotiation. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Life stayed steady. Not perfect, but honest. I paid my bills. I laughed at dumb things. I planned ahead without fear of everything collapsing if I made the wrong move. And sometimes, so rarely, quietly, I thought about my mother. Not with anger. With clarity. She didn't kick me out to make me strong. She kicked me out because she didn't know how to sit with her own disappointment. That wasn't my weight to carry. The last time I heard her name was through a passing comment at a family gathering I almost didn't attend. Someone mentioned she asked about me. Someone else said I seemed different now. They were right. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was choosing. And that's the part no one warns you about, the moment when the pain stops being the center of the story, and you realize the quiet life you built without help is the real ending. So I'll leave you with this. If the people who were supposed to protect you disappeared when you needed them most, and you still built something steady without them, when they come back, asking for space in the life you created, do you owe them a door, or do you owe yourself peace? I didn't answer my mom's messages right away. Not because I wanted her to panic. Not because I wanted revenge. I just didn't know who I would become if I replied too fast. 3 years earlier, I had sat at a bus stop with a dying phone and $20, learning what silence felt like when it came from someone who was supposed to protect you. Now the silence was mine, and it felt heavier than I expected. When I finally agreed to meet her, it wasn't at my place. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet coffee shop near my office, the kind of place where nobody pays attention to anyone else's pain. She was already there when I arrived. Smaller somehow. Hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. Eyes lifting too quickly when the bell over the door rang. She smiled when she saw me, then stopped, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. I sat down across from her. Didn't reach for a drink. Didn't say it was okay. She talked. About stress. About fear. About how hard things had been after I left. I listened. And somewhere between her excuses and her apologies, I realized something that surprised me. She wasn't here because she finally understood what she'd done. She was here because she needed something. Her lease was ending. Her hours had been cut. She was tired of feeling alone. She asked, carefully, if she could stay with me for a little while. Just until she figured things out. I didn't answer right away. I thought about that hallway door locking behind me. The trash bag hitting the floor. The way she'd said, "That's on you," and turned away. I didn't remind her of any of it. I just said, calmly, "I can help you find resources. I can help you apply places. But I can't be your safety net." Her face changed then. Not anger. Not sadness. Understanding. This was the consequence she'd never planned for. I walked out a few minutes later, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won. But because I hadn't shrunk. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from her. Shorter this time. No excuses. I understand. I stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it face down and going back to work. Because the life I built didn't come from being saved. It came from being left. And sometimes I wonder, when someone pushes you out at your weakest, do they realize they might be creating the one person they'll never be able to lean on again? It was a quiet coffee shop near my office, the kind of place where nobody pays attention to anyone else's pain. She was already there when I arrived. Smaller somehow. Hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. Eyes lifting too quickly when the bell over the door rang. She smiled when she saw me, then stopped, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. I sat down across from her. Didn't reach for a drink. Didn't say it was okay. She talked. About stress. About fear. About how hard things had been after I left. I listened. And somewhere between her excuses and her apologies, I realized something that surprised me. She wasn't here because she finally understood what she'd done. She was here because she needed something. Her lease was ending. Her hours had been cut. She was tired of feeling alone. She asked, carefully, if she could stay with me for a little while. Just until she figured things out. I didn't answer right away. I thought about that hallway door locking behind me. The trash bag hitting the floor. The way she'd said, "That's on you," and turned away. I didn't remind her of any of it. I just said, calmly, "I can help you find resources. I can help you apply places. But I can't be your safety net." Her face changed then. Not anger. Not sadness. Understanding. This was the consequence she'd never planned for. I walked out a few minutes later, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won. But because I hadn't shrunk. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from her. Shorter this time. No excuses. "I understand." I stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it face down and going back to work. Because the life I built didn't come from being saved. It came from being left. And sometimes I wonder, when someone pushes you out at your weakest, do they realize they might be creating the one person they'll never be able to lean on again?